What's up, everybody? Wanted to do just an updated sort of overview of how I interpret order flow and a couple different ways that we can sort of see it. Now, a lot of people within the space, Forex at large, sort of view order flow as this very, very specific thing, which is known as a change of character or an order flow realignment. It could be a number of different terms, internal boss, whatever it is. So there's a couple different ways that I look at it, and just wanted to shed a little bit of light on this so that we are essentially moving forward when we kind of revise this flowchart model system that we're working with and be able to start putting it into more of like an SOP driven system. You'll be able to understand a little bit more what we're talking about, be able to give it some context on the charts, and understand when we talk about an order flow realignment to get back into a pro trend, pro order flow state. It doesn't necessarily need to come from the quote unquote change of character or a chalk. So let me just explain this. So this is what most people know as sort of like the chalk, right? Which is essentially a liquidation of a high followed by a break of structure and then usually a supply chain sort of forming. So this is just basically the way I think the more formal way of kind of articulating what this really is this is a bearish internal structure break, right? So we get this structural low, a bullish structural low that essentially fails, and then it's a matter of where does it fail from. Obviously you can see that we have a flip zone. Maybe this takes liquidity on a lower time frame, whatever it might be. So just wanted to talk about this. This isn't really the important one. The important ones are actually over to the right hand side, but I'm going to go through this one at the bottom as well, just so that everybody understands. So again, the same thing, but the opposite sides of this would be your bearish internal structure break, which is known as kind of like your quote unquote change of character or chalk, and then the same thing down here on the left hand side where we kind of get this supply chain forming into probably a higher time frame demand zone. Once we actually mitigate the demand zone, typically we'll get a push into the most recent supply, failing to take out the low, and then breaking through this actual supply region, which is an order flow realignment to go back bullish, right? So these are kind of like the more standardized versions of order flow realignments. Just wanted to kind of touch on those first, and then getting into some of the other ones. This is arguably one of the most important ones that we sort of look at within our community, and I think it's where a lot of people kind of get caught up in the market and they don't really realize how important these little internal bits end up becoming, right? So this is called a bearish substructure realignment. So what this means is that essentially we've got this push that comes into probably some sort of a higher time frame supply. It builds liquidity, comes into the extreme. Now we cannot trade from here. The reason you can't trade from here is because it's an unconfirmed strong high. Even though it's mitigating probably something very high probability, the theory behind this is that we need to be very careful about trading off of something that doesn't break something relevant to the left. Even if there's a demand level in here that has interaction, you just it's still one of these things that it becomes higher and higher risk, not knowing that there's intention in the market to continue downward. Now, when these things sort of happen is typically after a very, very large liquidation of price. A perfect example would be on USD CAD. Actually, let me just jump over to USD CAD so I can show you what this looks like just on a 15-minute. Yeah, so something along the lines of this, right, where we actually don't get the sort of change of character or anything of that nature, but we do get here, let me just go like this. Where's my drawing tools? So we get this higher time frame sort of liquidation, right? And then we essentially mitigate some sort of a supply over here. We get the initial tap in, push up, come back down, we push up and then liquidate this high rate in here, push down, order flow realigns, and then we look at the substructure to be able to get involved, right? So it's just one of these things where we actually don't get a chalk. This is not really a demand zone. Your demand failure is down here. So it's just one of these things where typically on like a higher time frame sweep, you're going to see something along the lines of this: liquidity built, taken, pushed down, showing that order flow has in fact realigned, breaking substructure, and then creating supply chains to be able to continue in that pro order flow direction. So same thing on the flip side of things, looking at a bullish substructure realignment. trading this like this, like ideally we'd like to see a higher time frame sweep, M15, M30, H1, H4, whatever it might be daily. And then what happens is we come back down into this zone, but because we don't know that this is a strong low based on the fact that it did not break anything substantial to the left-hand side in this price leg, we just need to be very mindful of like the additional confirmations that we could start to use. So we start to look at the internal bits, right? So when we essentially break through these liquid regions underneath here, and then mitigate this unconfirmed strong low, and then push through and actually break through this level, this confirms that this low should in fact be strong. Of course, this isn't taking into account liquidity concepts or anything like this. This is just a very, very basic and generic schematic of how substructure realignments can be a very powerful tool. Keep in mind, like I said, in these two diagrams, this is typically done after a higher time frame sweep into a very, very specific level. Once that actually happens, like I said, a lot of times what is going to happen is we don't actually have a demand failure in any of these legs or a supply failure in any of these legs. So once we come into these levels, we do not want to trade them. We do not want to trade these. We want to wait for order flow to realign with an internal structure or the substructure break to be able to then confirm the strong low as well as the strong high.